John Monroe here in the city that's currently called Vancouver, at the water that's still being called English Bay, in the country that for the time being is called Canada. Someone lent me this bike. My friend Glenn, thank you Glenn. And I'm gonna ride it around the city. To think about two kinds of ideas. One being, I'm not used to clips on the pedals here. One being Vancouver in comparison, and two, thinking about the relationship between cycling infrastructure and gentrification. And so the two, I guess, arguments I want to make as I'm riding around are that Vancouver has a lot to teach other cities about a model of what a city can be in terms of public space and a good place to live. And secondly, I want to make the argument that there's a relationship between good cycling infrastructure and kind of reallocations of public space away from just automobiles. There's a relationship between that and gentrification, but that relationship is more one of correlation than cause. So those are the two kind of ideas that I want to sort of put forward, and it's nice to be in this location. It's a really suitable place to think about them. And I picked this particular part of Vancouver very deliberately because this is a place very important to Vancouver's past, crucial in conversations about Vancouver's present, and a very inspiring location, thinking about Vancouver's future and thinking about the future of other cities that may want to use this very spot that I'm coming up to here and all along here as a model for how cities can look. And so what I mean here specifically is the site of Sanok, which was a center of the Squamish Nation, the original people who lived in this part of what's now Vancouver, or what is, again, for the time being, Vancouver. And the members of the Squamish Nation who lived here at Sanok, at their site here, their village, we might call it, their center, were evicted from their land and were sent over to North Vancouver from this area, Kitsilano, in the early part of the 20th century. They reacquired that land, and the Squamish Nation is going to build a huge housing development here at Sanok that's going to have some market housing, some affordable housing, that's going to have, the proposal is to have one car parking space for every 10 residences. So in an expression of Indigenous sovereignty, they will not need to follow the kind of parking minimums that city council rules may stipulate. So this is a really important symbolic place to begin any discussion about cycling and bike lanes and housing, because the thing is that housing is very much part of the puzzle about how cities need to be, of course, and strangely, it's sometimes left out of discussions of active travel. And so Sanok is a reminder that every single part of, every square inch of where I will be while I'm here in this city is, of course, on stolen land, as is every part of this place that is called Canada. And so if we're thinking about cycling infrastructure, we need to think about housing, and the thing that connects all of these issues is just a basic sort of desire for fairness, that all of these, oh, here's a little advertisement for Sanok. Let's have a look. Well, this is great. I can show you what the image looks like. Over the next few years, the project team will be creating a series of videos, oh great, outlining our collective values, city building vision, design and inspiration, and project architecture. So you can see here, so look, I'll show you. There's the Burrard Street Bridge. And this is the Burrard Street Bridge here. I'm just right where this, I guess, tower will be, so you can get a good sense of what they have planned here. So so exactly, that this is just a good reminder that that these questions are related, and they're questions about what kind of city we want to see. And Vancouver is a great model for how this might happen in terms of, as I'll be looking at, this is sort of what I want to do on these rides around the city, is the ways that cycling infrastructure has, Vancouver has shown, there's lots of problems still, but Vancouver has shown what's possible, and many other cities could learn from this. Vancouver has also shown what's possible in making a very unaffordable, unfair, unequal city in the ways that governance in the interests of real estate developers and property speculators has really shaped this city in ways that has made it very unaffordable for anyone who's not a millionaire, essentially, at this point. And so Vancouver makes for a really sort of potent example in terms of exploring this question of gentrification, unaffordability, and bike lanes. So of course, one simplistic sort of thing that I want to think against here is to say that that simply the bike lanes and the cycling infrastructure causes the gentrification. I want to push back against that to say what causes the gentrification is the form of property ownership and the form of real estate capitalism that this city is organized around. And so Vancouver poses a really good model for other cities in terms of what other cities might want to do to make their space more fair, and as we'll see examples as I'm riding around of good cycling infrastructure, and what not to do in terms of just giving your city over to real estate interests and letting the property speculators run wild and make the city really only a city for some and not for others. So public space reallocated for more forms of mobility, but at the same time, housing space for everyone is what Vancouver has certainly not achieved. It's achieved one of these things and not the other. So I'm going to ride around and have a look at some of the places where you can ride a bike and walk and skateboard in this city, and do that while thinking about the deep crisis of unaffordability that Vancouver presently is structured by. Okay, let's go. One thing about Vancouver, there are several particularly pleasant rides. This is the Arbutus Corridor, which was the Arbutus Greenway, I guess it's called. It used to be a train track, and they took it out, put this in. The train track was in disuse anyways, but now it's this particularly nice ride. I mean, there is a contradiction with this one too, though, because the SkyTrain, which is a really central part of public transit in this city, was also supposed to run a line through here, and having the old railway line, it was the perfect spot to do it. But this is on the west side of Vancouver, which is the traditional rich part of the city, and the rich people over here, they don't like public transit, and they don't like public transit users, so they were able to use their power with City Hall to make sure that this public transit line didn't come through here, which is a real shame, because we could have the bike lane and the SkyTrain. But at least we've got the bike lane. And it covers quite a bit of distance as well. It goes from the very southern end of Vancouver, which is out by the airport, and it runs all the way to False Creek, which is just across from downtown. And Vancouver has a lot of unpleasant roads to ride on. This is Kingsway, one of the major thoroughfares through the city. Not much to like about riding on this one. This is Slocan Street, which is a designated cycling street. But which has no cycling infrastructure on it whatsoever. A wide road and parked cars on each side. doesn't feel very safe. And here's the Rupert Street bike lane. Paint only, definitely less than ideal. Now out at Spanish Banks, this is actually a bike lane. Very in need of a redesign, and not just repainting the faded paint, but also rethinking this bike lane next to a whole bunch of car parking. That doesn't make much sense at all. There must be a lot of near misses here. And it looks like the bike lane just disappears altogether. Share the road. It's not very reassuring. Still out on the UBC property, the endowment lands here, and they have all the space for golfers. I would have expected more from them in terms of what they've got on the road here, more than just a painted bike lane. Got some barriers in UBC. Just exiting the UBC endowment lands here. One of the main entrances to the campus. And the bike lane just ends altogether. Arthur Lang Bridge, this one connects the airport to Vancouver. Clearly could use a protected barrier here. Reminder of the danger that cyclists still face in Vancouver than this. Augustin Beltran. Augustin was a Chelsea fan. He loved plants, poetry, camping, juggling, painting, playing the cello, guitar and ukulele, fantasy, hikes, spike ball, bikes, his friend, his girlfriend, and his family. He was incredibly kind, intelligent, and funny. He was a beautiful soul. Rest in peace, friend. A cyclist who was killed by a driver here just recently. So even with good quality infrastructure, the cars continue to pose a deadly danger. This is Southwest Marine. Also in need of a barrier on the bike lane here. this point, the bike lane just disappears. But I don't want to emphasize and dwell too much on the poor cycling infrastructure in Vancouver. There's plenty of it. But the reason not to dwell on it in this ride or set of rides is because every city has poor cycling infrastructure. And what Vancouver has is some actually quite decent places to ride. So I think I'll focus on those. Okay, and coming up to Gerrard Street Bridge. One bike lane on each side, both going in one direction each. This is also just a nice bridge. And it used to be shared path, bikes on the sidewalk, and it was hopeless because there's a lot of pedestrians on this bridge, always. So they clearly needed to do this, and the best part about it is they took space from the cars to do it. I remember watching on TV just reporters kind of speaking to drivers who were stuck in traffic at first when they first brought in the lane. I mean, I don't think in the long term it made more car traffic. The drivers just adjusted or whatever. But yeah, the drivers were losing it, and the Downtown Business Improvement Association was very opposed to it. But luckily it got put in, because obviously it just makes this bridge so much better. And this also connects the Kitsilano neighborhood, where Sanok is, to downtown, so another major connector, and also just a very pleasant ride across that bridge. And you have your choice here of directions you can go in. You don't have to pick the safe one or the dangerous one. You can just go where you want to go and have a bike path as you do it. Quite a good network. This is the Central Valley Greenway on East 2nd Avenue. It's a nice, simple, safe design. This is a barrier that should be standard. Path along the north arm of the Fraser River. It's the suburb of Richmond on the other side there. Road. It's got quite a nice path. I've never been on this one before. Protected, lots of room. Nice gravel path here along the water, heading out from downtown towards UBC. Special bonus, rabbits. SkyTrain bridge, which connects the suburb of Richmond over there. The Vancouver airport is out that way. And this is a major connector with the public transit, of course, the SkyTrain and the ramp up. The ramp is a bit of this way up here is a bit of a throwback to 90s in design, I think. This kind of way that you're coming up slowly and interrupting the flow a little bit, rather than what they might have done would have been to run the ramp straight through across this bit of industrial area and right up Canby Street, which is the main street which the SkyTrain follows up that way. But still, this is a pretty good way to get across, nice wide pathway to get across to Richmond. There's a little more of what the SkyTrain bridge looks like. And if it's raining, even got a little bit of a covered section over here. And this very nice pump track here. I'm in Vancouver's North Shore right now. Wanted to wait till there was no kids to film. And great place to obviously encourage kids to just experience the joy of cycling in a fun little spot. But this is also right next to probably my favorite bike path in Vancouver. And this is the North Shore Spirit Trail. I lived in North Vancouver as a child, and I know this area pretty well. This used to be a trail, but the city over here has committed to making it a path for everyone. And as you can see, it's very accessible for anyone who wants to use it. I mean, whereas cars privatize public space by making roads unsafe for anyone who doesn't own a car, a space like this, thank you, haha, hello, a space like this is a commons running through the city. And again, it's always important to remember that this is public space on Indigenous land, but also, of course, there are important advocates for cycling and infrastructure like this among Indigenous communities, of course, in North Vancouver. Kilselum is one of the main spokespeople I've heard on this for the Squamish Nation. So there's a view of the kind of industrial part of the harbor, but my favorite part is coming up right here. Check out this bridge. Just for cycling, walking, skateboarding. If your city doesn't have something like this, you should be asking the people in charge, why not? This is Grand Boulevard in North Vancouver. And this one's a really nice example of a road that was wider than was needed for just cars. So now there's this section that I'm in right now for bikes and other kind of vehicles. The cars can go on the other side. But what I'm particularly struck by here is how this design on the part that's left for the cars there on my left would encourage drivers to go a bit slower. Also a speed bump there, which is nice to see. So there's a way in which, even if this lane is mostly for bicycles, because pedestrians can go on the sidewalk on either side, it still makes it safer for everyone overall because it slows the drivers down. I like the bike tunnel as much as the next person, but I don't like these barriers. Here's one I've been looking forward to. The new Stanley Park bike lane. Anyone who's spent time around toddlers knows that sharing can be hard. And I know that some have found that here. Because as you can see, space has been reallocated here. And drivers have been asked to, well, forced to share the space here with other forms of mobility. And it's proved controversial in that some local politicians seem to see kind of strategy for vote getting through opposing this. Some local right-wing talk radio also kind of trying to generate ratings. I think through things like claiming there isn't parking access, or sort of exaggerated or just straight false claims about what this even entails. But as you can see, it's simply the public space is divided between different modes of transportation. And this lane shows to my mind, one of the strongest sort of examples of the affordability crisis in housing not being caused by bike lanes. And that's because the people who are opposing this, SUV drivers who want to speed through the park, and again, some local right-wing radio and political kind of personalities, particularly the political ones, because they hold the power or aspire to it, to change this back to a mode in which the cars would not be sharing space with other forms. But those that are opposing this are also very much, particularly through the political parties, locally the NPA and provincially the BC Liberals, who have been the most enthusiastic promoters of the unequal modes of regulating the property market in favor of developers, and have had consistent policies since the 1980s, which have favored the rich and certainly not favored housing, people who are renting housing, or or the working class or poor people in this city. So the advocates for car culture are also the advocates for neoliberal forms of rule, which render the city increasingly unequal. So this is one place where you can see how the link isn't bike lanes equals gentrification, but rather opponents of bike lanes are the spokespeople for the greatest gentrifying forces, and that again is the property owners and a market regulated so as to encourage speculation and ultimately inequality. This is Second Beach here, some parks, a particularly popular part of the city, and now people can safely access it on their bikes. Plenty of parking too. So very clear that car drivers are able to access this spot as well. And some of those who are advocating in favor of drivers having access to kind of move fast, the priority being for their convenience to move fast through the park, and that the bike lane is an impediment to that, sometimes put forward a kind of concern around accessibility issues for disabled users of the park, which seems hard to sort of accept, given that there is access to the park at the different parking lots, and this division of the space is not impeding that. As you can see, the lane access continues heading into the city. This is English Bay. This is the other side of the water from where I began this video. And again, this is what, if your city is not giving you safe bike lanes like this, the kind that show a commitment to reallocating the space, less space for cars, more space for everyone else, then you should be demanding that, because look what you can have. Thank you. No problem. Vancouver has some municipal elections coming up, and the right-wing neoliberal party is opposing bike lanes and promoting car culture, which remains very dominant in Vancouver, despite really pleasant exceptions like this Beach Avenue lane. And it will be interesting to see how that electoral strategy plays out. My suspicion is that it's going to fail, and that more residents can see what the benefits of this are for more people, and this idea that every square inch of every road should just be for drivers is, I think, fading in Vancouver, though it undoubtedly has traction in the suburbs. Yeah. And it might be of interest to politicians elsewhere in places like Birmingham to watch the results of an election in a city like this that has begun to make a commitment to cycling infrastructure. And if the votes come in in favor of the parties and the individuals who are in favor of lanes like this one on Beach Avenue, then maybe politicians elsewhere could take that as a signal to get started on beginning the transformation that a lane like this represents into something that's more democratic in terms of the kinds of access, and creates again something of a commons within city space, rather than the privatization of roads that cars represents. This is a really nice ride along here. This is Olympic Village, and across the water there is the site of the old Expo 86 site. And so again, a kind of a set of contradictions with this one. You get this lovely waterfront ride with good amount of space for pedestrians and cyclists, but also in a place where it's, again, very unaffordable to live. The Expo 86 and the 2010 Winter Olympics were both pivotal moments in the city in terms of advertising the city as a place for investment for the international elite. And in the aftermath of the Olympics, they built this Olympic Village housing. Well, some of it was for the athletes during the games. There were promises afterwards that there would be a certain amount of affordable housing. That amount kept going down and down as promises kept getting broken, and now we're left with the really nice waterfront and this housing, which is really expensive. So the two parts of Vancouver really coming together here in terms of what it represents and who the city is for. During the Olympics, the slogan that you often heard, "No Olympics on Stolen Land," gave another vision for how the city could have been, but the dominant vision prevailed, leaving the city again somewhere where it would be difficult to afford to live near this all this really nice public space and this really pleasant ride along this water here, which is called False Creek. Personal note, that stadium over there and this bridge coming up here, the Canby Street Bridge, my father was an iron worker in this town and he helped build both of these things. So it's always nice to see that permanent, he's passed on now, very nice to see that permanent legacy. Okay, this is False Creek. This is Ontario Street. Which is a bit like Adinak. It doesn't have a bike lane all the way, but it's a street that cyclists are encouraged to use. And there's a few ways that drivers are discouraged as well, which makes it a much nicer street. So we've got a local traffic only, drive slowly, watch your people walking on the road. It's also because this is a baseball stadium here. Oh, and this is particularly nice. So you can't drive through in a car at all here. And it just makes the space so much nicer and accessible to everybody. This is great. This is relatively new. I've been on Ontario Street many times in the past, but this set of barriers is new. But as usual, Vancouver reminds us of the connection between housing and bike infrastructure in terms of trying to create a better city, a fairer city. And that's this site right over here, kind of nondescript area. It looks like possibly some construction is going on, but probably not. And this site really exemplifies contemporary Vancouver. So this used to be this empty field here. It's quite sizable. This used to be where the Little Mountain housing complexes were. And these were old post-World War II, very nice housing and affordable housing. And there was a long-standing community here who were kicked out in one of yet another one of Vancouver's displacements to make the city, to clear the city of affordable housing and the people who lived in it. And this was cleared for the Olympics back in 2010. Whatever changed hands, I'm sure, likely relationships between, maybe even personal relationships between developers and people in government, the BC Liberals it was at the time. And the developers took this and they just sat on it. And I guess they're waiting for the right price. So this is a great example here. This is not really gentrification. This is, well, in a way it is because of the displacement of the people who, the working class community who lived here. But also it shows us that it's not the people who are riding on the bike lanes and who are trying to get access to public space and are looking for places to live that are the cause of the gentrification. It's exactly the forces that create such a scandalous site as this, sitting behind a fence, a place which was once affordable housing in a city that so badly needs it. A few spots of note along here. Nice park on my right, the classic Vancouver old roller coaster, still in operation I believe, at the Pacific National Exhibition here, Playland as it's also known as. And this is a little route here around what used to be a big soccer stadium here. Nice little bike track. Here's something. The Miracle Mile. British Empire Games, Roger Bannister came in at under 4 minutes the first time two men broke the 4-minute barrier in the same race at Empire Stadium in 1954. I'm not sure when they tore that stadium down that was here where these soccer fields are now. But I came to a game, my dad took me to a game at this stadium in, must have been the early 1980s, to see the Canadian national team play the Scottish team, which my family being from Scotland was quite exciting. Now something coming up here is an aspect of active travel that we often overlook. Not so much in a place like Vancouver, but in the UK, which is skateboarding, which really has so many positive things to add to transportation and recreation in a city. Coming up here to Leaside Skateboard Park. And it's a nice covered park. Gives people a place to hang out. Hope they don't mind me cutting through. No way. Sorry, too old. So this skateboard park that I just passed through here, which again is a great place for young and old to hang out, is named after Lee Matassi, who was a local skateboarder here. I used to live in this neighborhood. I'd see him over here when this was just a kind of abandoned tunnel. It was an abandoned tunnel, and he would come over and put up little ramps and started to make little bits of concrete stuff, and it just sort of took shape as a DIY park. And horribly, Lee was murdered in the early or mid 2000s by some idiot with a gun in downtown Vancouver, and the park's been appropriately named for him. And there's so many places and so many cities underneath big motorways. This is underneath Hastings Street, which is one of the big wide streets in the city. And there's so many spaces like that in so many cities that are just sitting there unused. And skateboarding is such a great solution to that kind of space that that's just sitting there. And Leaside is a great example of that. Vancouver is a pretty good city for skateboard parks, generally speaking. Skateboarding's not as much of it's not as big in the UK, but it exists. We have our own in Birmingham, Bournebrook Skateboard Park, which is great, also made by the locals, do-it-yourself style. City authorities and active travel campaigners have lots to learn from skateboarders who themselves are actively traveling and reconfiguring public space in all kinds of interesting and creative ways. Adenac Street. This is, as you can see, a pretty well used street for cycling. It has very little in the way of infrastructure, but it's a long-standing, maybe one of the oldest kind of encouraged just cycling routes that connects East Vancouver through to the suburb of Burnaby into the downtown. Here's a nice little pocket park with another little bit of skateboarding on those steps there with the metal caps for grinds and nose slides and tail slides and the things people do. So downtown Vancouver in the distance there. This is a new building, another new building, of which there are so many every time I come here for a visit. This one looks interesting though. There's some social housing in this part of the city. I'm just heading into Strathcona, which is, oh, it's a care home. Okay. I'm just heading into Strathcona. You go through Strathcona and through Chinatown to get into the center of the city. And this is an area that has social housing, as you can see, some apartments, but it has a lot of old, renovated, beautiful old houses, all of which cost an absolute fortune. This is an area that, like lots of places in East Vancouver, 20 years ago and before, you could find relatively affordable housing, and now, with the exception of some social housing, this is a very, very expensive neighborhood to live in, as are they all. But this is the kind of closest residential neighborhood to downtown as well, or one of the closest ones, and so it also has that appeal. This is nostalgic for me because I used to take Adenac to work often when I worked downtown and lived in East Van. Maybe I'll cut off of Adenac for a second here just to take a little cruise through Chinatown, which is always nice to do. So this street, as you can see, it's just kind of by custom that it's become. I mean, it's because it's a major direct route between two significant places, downtown and East Vancouver, but also I think drivers have just learned over time to go a different way. There certainly cars can come down this road, and they do, but anybody familiar would want to go really slow and would recognize that if not officially, this is kind of one of those streets where car drivers are more guests and cyclists are more the kind of main constituency using it. I'll leave Adinak and turn right here to go through a little bit of Chinatown. Heading towards the Georgia Street Viaduct, which is a significant piece of infrastructure and of the city's history in several different ways. That kind of freeway looking thing up there. You'll note a few things as I pass. One is the Plaza Skateboard Park underneath it. Really good use of the space there. Let's have a look. Lots of good use being made of the space. And now I'll loop around to note a couple of other significant things about the viaduct. So it was supposed to be a freeway. As you can see, it's up top there, and it ends just up here at Main Street, which I'll come to. And it was one of those freeway revolts that had it stopped from going as far as the planners originally wanted to. Kind of Jane Jacobs inspired opposition to freeways, like what happened with the Embarcadero Freeway in San Francisco. So here, activists stopped. So here's the end of it here. Activists got together and stopped the further construction, which would have torn through all of Strathcona along Adinak Street, basically going all the way out to the Trans-Canada Highway, which is a few miles ahead of me eastward. So it's kind of a story that gets celebrated in Vancouver history, rightly so, because the continuation of this viaduct and freeway would have been really bad for the city. But really significantly was a previous displacement, a previous racist displacement in Vancouver, and that was here in this area, which is called Hogan's Alley. And this was a center of the Black community in Vancouver, and that community was displaced to make way for the part of the freeway that they did make. I believe that was the sort of the original sort of, I guess, justification on the part of the white power structure. And so this small Black community was displaced, and this is it's kind of an epicenter here when you think about it. That the racial displacement of Black people here in Hogan's Alley, right next to Chinatown, which was itself historically a place of Chinese exclusion, unwanted police presence, other kinds of racial control, and of course all of this takes place on the indigenous territory that was stolen with the arrival of European settlers in the first place. So the Hogan's Alley aspect of this is a crucial part of thinking about these kind of layers. If you think about it's sort of like if you think about infrastructure and cycling and cars without thinking about race, you would miss such a significant part of the story, and that's really evident at this particular location here. Okay, so another interesting thing about the viaduct is that it has a bike lane. A proper one, with a barrier. And the viaduct itself is coming down soon, I believe. I think they've finally made that decision, which connects up a few issues again. Great to have, you know, there's no need for a freeway going into a city, into a downtown. And so that was already a case successfully made when they stopped the viaduct from being longer than it turned out to be. But this is the section that exists. And it's great that this bike lane is here. It wasn't always here, of course. And this was a really dangerous piece of road to ride along because it really encourages speeding. But if they tear it down only to turn it over to real estate developers, property speculators, and the people who will continue to make great fortunes by making the city too expensive for most people to live, then it's not much of a victory. And so the story of the viaduct, with all the displacements that it entails going in, and now with its imminent demise, just embedded in all the kinds of inequalities that structure life in this city. So it will be interesting to see what happens on the land underneath this when this gets torn down. This is the hockey arena. The Vancouver Canucks, an important corporation in this city. You see their logo and advertising for them everywhere. So this should take me right into Dunsmuir Street, which has a bike lane, a protected bike lane. So the principle of kind of connectivity and network here coming into the downtown. It's nice to have this barrier protected lane, but if it just spits you out into a road with car traffic, then that's not so good. But here we have a nice continuous, safe and pleasant connection. And continuing with the theme of network and connectedness, I'm heading west through downtown, but I want to go south, and I need more than just this one through lane to do that. So I can turn left here onto another bike lane, Richard Street. This is definitely a new one for me. The last time I was in Vancouver, this did not exist. So it looks like they might have taken some of the sidewalk space and maybe some of the car space to make this. The trees are a nice touch. More new buildings. That Roman Colosseum inspired sort of building over there. Can't quite see it behind the glass tower, but that's the public library. So good to be able to get there by bike lane with this new lane in place. But again, I mean, it's the same theme, but it's so strong. The contradictions abound with this safe and more democratic kind of allocation of public space. With the bike lanes here, more people can travel in more different ways, and you don't have to own a car to move safely and efficiently through your city, but in a place that no one can afford to live. All these little condos are so expensive. But I still would say that it's correlation and not cause. The bike lanes are not the cause of the expensiveness. Capitalism is the cause of the expensiveness. A housing market that's regulated in the interests of developers and the very wealthy, which Vancouver has a considerable history of, particularly beginning in the 1980s with, there's another bike lane going up there. What is this? Smythe Street. So again, it's nice to see the network. But the mayor of Vancouver in the 1980s, Gordon Campbell, who went on to be the premier of the province in the early part of the 21st century, was a great asset to the rich people of this city, ruling for the rich and re-regulating the market and re-regulating the market in their favor. Last stop, Queen Elizabeth Park. A little bit of a climb to get up here, but well worth it. Some nice views of the city. And so there you have it, Vancouver. A city I feel other cities, especially can't help but think of my own current hometown of Birmingham, can learn a lot from Vancouver, both in terms of making the city more democratic in terms of mobility. As we've seen, there's just more ways to get around this city and more possibilities of access for more of a variety of people. In short, you don't have to own a car to be able to get safely around a lot of Vancouver, which makes it a better place to live. At the same time, it's become more of an unequal city as people are priced out of their neighborhoods, as you know, the landlord class just makes so much money, that small number of people, and then the larger number of the city's residents have to struggle under these circumstances. So that's another thing to learn from, that you can make public space more democratic, but you also need to make sure that people can afford to live in the city that you're thinking about. And again, the last point, it's not a causal relationship between the bike lanes and the affordability crisis. Vancouver is founded, the public space is itself stolen land, as is the private space. It's founded in displacements, it's founded in inequality, and over the years that's built under neoliberal conditions. That's been accelerated, particularly since the 1980s, to lead to the situation that we have now. And landlords and developers are going to take advantage of the good things that bike lanes bring to make cities nicer places to live, just like they would take advantage of the beautiful scenery that Vancouver has to offer. But that's not the bike lanes themselves. It's those developers and the local authorities who have, and provincial and national and international authorities who have created a property situation that's so unequal. That's where the fault lies, and that's where our attention needs to be, as in other cities we work towards making mobility more democratic and housing more democratic as well.